All I got was, go back to where you come from. Like, I stood there in shock.
The government and the police and the mainstream media are trying to convince the entire population not to believe their lying eyes.
What is far right and what is far left? From political violence to riots to the inflammatory language of what's going on in the UK. I'm Garcia.
I'm Izzy, and welcome to Informally Informed. So, it's been an eventful couple of weeks in the UK. We've been on about doing an episode about political violence for a while, so we thought now was the perfect moment to do that. So for those who aren't aware, on the 29th of July in Southport, which is maybe half an hour, 40 minutes drive from where we are, there was a stabbing. A 17-year-old went into a children's dance class and stabbed 8 kids and a couple of other people, which led to the deaths of 3 children. Since that, there was... The police, because he was 17, refused to release the information of who it was. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were posting online that this was an Islamic terrorist attack, which turned out not to be true. And as a result, because we've seen several Islamic terrorist attacks in the forms of stabbings and bombings and people driving over people and stuff like that, there were... Instead of waiting for the information as to who it actually was, people assumed and took to the streets and started protesting. And a lot of those protests turned violent. Kier Starmer then put out a lot of information about the far right and banded everybody that was going about peacefully protesting as far right. Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot of Black people, a lot of Sikh people, a lot of all sorts of different people putting out videos on social media saying things like, oh, apparently, according to the government, I'm far right now, I'm a white supremacist, all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Alex Phillips did a good piece on this, of Alex Phillips of Talk TV. She gave a statement in which she was discussing, and there was a phone in, and she discussed the people of Britain, the everyday people of Britain, which Kier Starmer have now branded as far right. The taxpayers, the people that paid the most tax in Britain, are far right because they don't agree with the government stance. I'll read to you exactly what it is that Kier said, so we don't misquote him and accidentally become victims of his new authoritarian
regime.
Government. So he said, we have to stay on a high alert going into this weekend, meaning the weekend of the 6th, because we absolutely have to make sure our communities are safe. So when Kier Starmer gave this speech, he discussed in particular the Muslim communities, about how the government plans to protect them. He noted that there would be more police on the street. He'd be given more money to build mosques across the UK, and various other promises that he made to protect just one community in Britain, one type of community in Britain, I should say.
And this has led to accusations of two-tier policing. Mm-hmm. Elon Musk tweeted out hashtag two-tier care, and a lot of other people have been basically tweeting out the same thing. Since his stance...
Is it still tweeting if it's X?
I guess.
Are you Xing?
People have been Xing. People have been Facebooking. People have been YouTubing.
When you say it like that.
Everybody's been talking about it. Kier Starmer's approval rating has gone from 53%, not sure how it was that high in the first place, down to 37% in the last couple of weeks as a result of his response. Mm-hmm. Because from having looked at all the information, it does appear to be a two-tier policing system. There was one woman not too far from Chester that got arrested for posting inaccurate information on Facebook. Some guy got sentenced to 26 months, I think some guy down south, for shouting at the police. He wasn't even throwing bricks or anything like that. And bear in mind as well that the current backlog for sexual offences in this country is 18 months. There are currently 10,000 people in this country waiting, alleged sexual assault perpetrators, because he's not gone to court yet, waiting for their day in court. And there's a backlog of 18 months. Yet somehow, when it comes to people protesting on the street, in Belfast, the judge in Belfast, I've got his name written down here somewhere. Give me a second. Judge Rafferty said that you'll be refused bail if you get arrested, even if you're only watching from the sidelines. You don't even have to be participating in the riots or anything. You just have to be there and you're going to get arrested. And then they're wondering why people are turning around talking about two-tier policing. Like, if you give the impression that we're living in an unfair society, like, all you're doing is dealing with the symptoms by arresting people. You're not actually dealing with the cause of the problem.
So let's discuss that. Let's discuss the cause of the problem. Because we're everyday people. I like to consider myself an everyday person. I have a job. I pay taxes. I live in the UK. I live in a community. I live in a small town in the north of the UK. When I think of the causes, I look at London as though it's a different country. Because the problems that are in and around London is not necessarily the same issues that affect us in the rest of the country. That's not to say that we don't have the same general issues. Of course we do. Across the UK, taxation, inflation, all of those things affect economically. But the North has been depressed, and by that I mean historically depressed, since the 80s when they closed the mines. So you're talking about people who are deprived in areas. There are less jobs in the north than there are in the south. People always talk about there's loads of jobs in the UK. The jobs that they're talking about is in the south of the country. Okay.
But the bulk of the unemployed are in the north of the country, so it doesn't marry up.
So when people talk about how the UK is, I always feel like you're talking about your experience of London, usually. People from the outside the UK. And when I'm talking about what's happening in the north of the country, it seems like a completely different world, because it is. Taxation is felt in the north in a way that it's not felt in London. We don't have London weighing. Nobody gives us extra money for living in London. I'm not saying that they don't need it because the price of living is higher. But the general overall, the price of bread is the same price of bread. The price of milk is the same price of milk. So when you're getting paid less, your bills are going up. Because don't forget this, during the pandemic and over the last few years, we've had the fuel crisis. That's affected the north. People are unhappy.
And if you look at a lot of the places where it's kicking off, where there has been violence, they are in the north, places where there is high levels of multiculturalism. Places like Rotherham, places like Rochdale, places like Bolton, Oldham, places where large communities have been completely unheard, where the police and the councils have covered up the grooming gangs. So the people that are getting angry and the people that are going out on the streets and protest are the fathers and the brothers of the victims of the grooming gangs, that Kier Starmer, where multiculturalism has directly impacted their quality of life. And Kier Starmer is basically standing up and just saying, oh, it's just because you're far right. You have no right to an opinion on the situation.
Can we just talk about that for a second? Because I'm sick of hearing this misplaced use of political language. What is far right and what is far left? I actually looked this up because I wanted to be correct, even though I know that the left, on the left is ideas of freedom, equity, equality, fraternity, rights to progress and reform and internationalism. Okay. The right, on the other hand, has an emphasis on notions such as authority, hierarchy, and order. When you look at our political climate in the UK and you see what's happening and they're labeling it far right, from those descriptions, how could you possibly say that that's anywhere near the right? What I'm seeing is the Labour Party and Kier Starmer putting in right and far right authoritarian laws. And I'm seeing the left, anarchy is to the left. Let's just be clear there.
I don't agree with that.
Anarchy is to the left. That is the definition of the furthest left. The furthest left is anarchy.
I think that so the way I look at it is the political spectrum is not a straight line. It's a square. So on the left and the right side, you have the economy, and at the top and the bottom, you've got the level of governmental control. So anarchy would be at the bottom. So you can be an anarchist and be on the far left or the far right or the bottom, or you can be a totalitarian and be on the left, on the right. Look at Pinochet. He was a right winger, but he was a totalitarian.
Yes, because that feeds into the authoritarian.
Look at Stalin.
definition.
Look at Stalin. He was a totalitarian. He was on the far left. So you cannot categorize it like that. And I don't agree with your definition of the right as being. I
mean, I looked it up, and these are the dictionary definitions. These are not my own personally, but sure.
So you think that the dictionary is telling me that a free market over strict, severe economic control is more authoritarian, because I don't agree with that. Because capitalism is on the right, whereas socialism is on the left. And socialism involves a stricter, more authoritarian control of the economy. But so you see how it's not as straightforward as that?
Oh, no, I understand. But do you not think that this is part of the problem? Wherein all of our
people are labeling people this way or the other.
The way that we look at things are so different. We're not even taught this in school. I don't remember being... Well, actually, I did government politics in school. Shout out, Mr. Hand. And so I'm pretty sure that I was taught this in school. But I also know that I went to a very good school. I don't know if this is taught in school, but this is the issue of what... If the government is labeling you far right, because in order to even have these labels, you have to be aware of what they are, the definitions of them, even vaguely, and be somewhat politically active. The government is labeling everybody far right because they don't agree with what they're doing. But actually, the authoritarianism in which they are acting in is to the right.
And actually, I would argue that I don't know if I'd say the vast majority, but a good percentage, probably even 50% of the people that are going out and looting Greggs of all places and a Shoe Zone of all places are not far right.
Why?
They're probably not even racist. They're probably not even pissed off about the stabbing. If it could have been Black Lives Matter and they'd have been there. They just want to trash shit up. They see an opportunity to do something that they don't normally get to do in day-to-day life, so they've turned up for it. But then, a lot of them are probably hardcore left-wingers. A lot of them are probably on the far right.
But then let me just bring up quickly what the media said about this. They labelled the perpetrator of this horrific crime as a Muslim. This country has seen since 9/11 terrorism, like every other country in the world. It's seen a rise in terror. Okay. Most of the terror attacks that have taken place have had a link to Islamic radicals. I believe that her name's Brigitte Gabriel, and she made an excellent point about this. But I'll get back to her. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought before I got to her. So we when I'm talking about the language of things, we need to recognize that although Kier Starmer himself isolated this community as something to look out for, separate to everybody else, even though they don't make up the vast majority of the population, but we need to look at where the radicals are coming from. Okay. This is where Brigitte Gabriel came in, because she was asked in a conference, some sort of conference. I saw this in a YouTube video. Izzy showed me, actually. And it was a Muslim lady asking about, basically saying that the vast majority of people that practice Islam are in fact peaceful. It's just a small minority that are perpetrating radicalism. And she had an excellent comeback for this, because she noted that the vast majority... They're not that okay. There's like 1.2 billion Muslims in the world. Even if 10% are radical, that's a large amount. The amount of lives that are being taken by the radicals is not offset by the peaceful. We can't as rational people not take into account that, yeah, of course there's going to be peaceful people, that it's a peaceful religion in its well,
Not in its
that's all
7th
religions,
century
you know,
form.
all religions are their own messed up situation, but the point is, one rotten fruit spoils the whole batch, and this is where we're at with this. Of course, people are going to be looking as though it's a majority situation,
But
because if you're looking at where the terror is coming from, it's coming from one group of people. But then this ties into racial language, because if you look at Muslims, Muslim is not a race. Islam is not a race. It's a religion. Can we please?
Well, according to the new definition of Islamophobia, have you heard about
No,
this?
I've not. What?
Okay, so the new definition of Islamophobia that's about to be brought into law is that Islam is a, quote, a form of racism that targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. That's a new definition. Targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So does that mean if I turn around and say that I don't think it's a good idea for gays to be thrown off buildings, that means that I'm Islamophobic because that's perceived Muslimness?
I am not sure how this country and its authoritarian law. I believe that we're going. Okay, I'm currently reading a book called The Mass Psychology of Fascism, and it's about the rise of.
So here's my next question: what's fascism?
Well, let me get to this. It's about the rise of Nazis in Germany at the time, and how a nation was turned to national socialism, because that's what Nazis short for. And it looks at how did one small group of people spread into the majority of reasonable people, so they all turned against one group. Okay. And I've not gotten far into this book because it's a difficult read, because it requires a lot of understanding, and I'm doing that between things. Is this what we're seeing in this country? Because we can't ignore the rise of racialized language under the guise of ideological discourse. At this point, it's kind of hard, even when watching the news, to know if they're discussing racism or ideological differences, or because it seems to me that they're just tying them together into one.
But they're conflating the two, and they're doing it deliberately to imply that those who have a problem with ideological differences are all racist. They're doing it. We don't believe in your values, and therefore, and they're doing it deliberately in order to silence people, because no one wants to be called a racist, especially if you're not. And they're doing it to turn effectively the rest of the society, like to allow people to think that the people that are concerned about ideological differences are effectively bad people, so don't associate with them.
Can you see the similarities?
Yeah,
I'm concerned about what's happening in the UK.
What you're saying is Starmer called them the far right, Hitler called them the Jews.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying, and it's kind of it's. I've lived in the UK for the majority of my life. Never before have I had, okay, racism happens. I work in a public sector. Of course, I've been racially abused. But on the street, and all I was doing was buying an almond croissant. Because I'm bougie like that. And all I got was, I do. All I got was, go back to where you come from. Like, I stood there in shock and said nothing initially, because it surprised me, because this has never happened to me before. Now, it had happened earlier in the week, but they were kids, and kids are kids, and kids are kids. But this was a grown man shouting at me outside of my local shop. People stopped. I was in shock, and then a split second hit me, and I just ripped into him, reminded him that I pay taxes. I pay more taxes than he probably has ever paid in his life. And then I asked him, I've lived in this community for a long time. I asked straight up, did you have an issue with me prior to this? Because I've never seen you before.
What did he say?
He said he's seen me all the time. And then I was like, yeah, but you've not answered my question. He was just screaming at me at this point. Did you have an issue with me prior? And what is your personal beef? nothing to say. Anyway, I went home because I just thought this is nonsense and I'm not going to stand here and entertain this. Because clearly you just want someone to vent to. I'm worried that these situations, because there was already two black people that were pulled out of a car or something like that. I saw that on the news. And yeah, we can't ignore what's actually happening in favor of just the political language that we use. We can't ignore what's happening on the actual streets as opposed to what the media thinks is happening. Kier Starmer is funding to happen and various other things. Most of the violence has come from people that have screamed one particular phrase that is, what's the word? It's only used in this particular religion, okay? We can't ignore it. Well, I didn't want to say it on, but we can't ignore it. We can't ignore it.
I'll say it.
We can't ignore it. And so the fact is, when these, but how do you know the difference? How do you know the difference? Because we've established that Islam is a religion, the way of Islam, the ideology. How do you definitively say, well, this person I'm going to attack because this, that, and the other, we can't say that we're not tipping over into a very racialized society.
And the government and the police and the councils and the mainstream media are trying to convince the entire population not to believe their lying eyes and try to convince them that it's not happening within the society. Yep. The Muslim Defence League, very aptly named, there were 15 arrests on Wednesday. They were going down the streets with machetes. I can't remember which news channel it was like Sky or BBC. They took their footage down off the website because masked Muslim men were going up to them screeching abuse and sticking their fingers up and screaming Allahu Akbar and walking down the street with machetes and big poles and stuff like that. There was one instant where they, obviously like the mosques have been targeted, so you can't really blame them for coming out and standing out and trying to protect what's theirs, I guess. But the response of then breaking into one of the pubs, throwing bricks through the pub windows, there was misinformation about a Muslim woman being acid attacked.
Yes,
that never got the same level of coverage as the misinformation spread about the Southport stabber. Yep. It's still misinformation. It was incorrect. People went out on the streets. White men have been targeted. They were beaten up. Journalists were targeted. Journalists had to flee. Police had to flee when they came down. They're the police. I saw a clip of one guy going up to the police officer saying, oh, the guy over there's got a knife, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, well, there's not much you can do. Police officers, old police commissioners are coming out of the woodworks, going on Talk TV and various other places and GB News talking about how they were told when they were in the police that it is specifically drummed in to treat different communities better. And they're told that if you arrest a Muslim, it's not worth the aggro because they're going to come out in force, this, that, and the other. Let them get away with murder.
But then also
4 in 10 sexual abuse convicts get suspended sentences. They're not even going to prison.
But where would they go?
They're not even going to prison.
Where would they go?
Well, there's space enough for that guy that got 26 months for screeching at the police.
I thought that there was no spaces in prison. I definitely remember the news telling me, Kier Starmer telling me that there was no space and he planned to work out the space issue.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because it's not like people that have lived in this country for the last 10 and 20 years. Bear in mind, most crime, like the significant proportion of crime, is committed by young men between the age of 18 and 25. Most of them grow out of it, some of them don't, right? So you cannot seriously expect me to believe that in the past 10 years that all the people that have lived in this country for the last 10, 20 years have suddenly decided out of nowhere to go out, get themselves arrested and get themselves sent to prison. There's something has changed to cause a space issue within prisons. And that thing is mass immigration.
But then this is
people
what I'm
coming
saying
from
before.
Other cultures, coming from areas. It makes perfect common sense to me that if people are coming from areas that have a higher crime rate, of course it's going to increase the crime rate in the local area.
While I agree, I Well, there's 2 points I want to make. The first one being fear. That's how we got here. Fear of what could happen, fear of what did happen, and fear of what could potentially happen in the future, because this started 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
And bear in mind, if the Manchester Arena bombing happened today,
let me make my second
it would be a whole other kettle of fish.
My second point is that is this constant blame on immigration. Now, it is a massive hot topic, but it's not only how we got here. Austerity brought us here. The economy brought us here. COVID brought us here. There's many things that have happened in the last 30 years that have brought us here. Government decisions have brought us here. Brexit has brought us here. Yes, immigration has also brought us here. But can we not forget that immigration is not a new thing? Okay? Britain, because I don't understand, because every conversation I've had, people talk about it as though immigration started 30 years ago or 10 years ago, this last century, this last 10 years is when immigration just suddenly started happen. Need I remind Britain of your own history and how we got here? Britain, the Empire, the Commonwealth. People always talk about how America saved Britain during the World War, the end of the Second World War. That's not what happened. India sent 2.5 million troops. Let us not rewrite history of how we got here. The Windrush generation.
I'm not talking about immigration though.
I'm aware of that, but can you just let me? The Windrush generation was brought over here in the 50s to fill jobs that weren't being filled after the war. So I'm just saying that we need to be very careful about how we discuss this immigration, because people are talking about it as though it's just happened. They're talking about the boats, the small boats. This didn't start with Kier Starmer's government. This started prior to this. And when you think of how many people came here on those small boats compared to how many people came here through legal immigration, this started a long, long time ago. When immigration happened and the slack immigration system in this country let people bring their relatives over on student visas.
So that's what we're talking about though.
Yes, so I'm also talking about how we got here in terms of people are unhappy because they feel like they're funding this. They feel like, but because we do have an underclass in this, we can't forget the class system that has also brought us here.
But I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. However, nobody's saying immigration. People are talking about mass immigration. So for the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the first 7 years of the 90s, immigration stood net between 30 and 50,000 a year. 1997, that skyrocketed when Tony Blair came into power. Mm-hmm. Last year, we saw net 750,000. The year before was net 750,000. The year before that was, I think, 500,000. It's gone up exponentially to the point where it is. I'm not saying it's the only cause, but first of all, we can't fix COVID. COVID's been and gone.
Of course not. We can't fix the past, but we can't forget it either.
We can fix mass immigration. Mm-hmm. So the reason why it's being talked about is because I'm not saying there are other issues, but I think they pale in comparison to the issue.
Okay, so let's say they close the border tomorrow.
I'm talking about immigration.
Let's say they close the border tomorrow. There were no flights in, no boats in, nothing else like that. The problems that we have will still be here. They wouldn't have disappeared. They will still be here because the people that are causing this terror are still here.
But it's step one.
Okay, so then how do you do this in the society that we live in? I mean, realistically, I don't mean these fanciful ideas of how we stop immigration, because this is the issue that we have. Whenever people mention immigration and how to deal with it, it's as though there's a magic wand that's just going to stop people from illegally coming to this country and doing whatever it is that they do. Am I saying that we don't need to reform our immigration system? Yes, we do, but we have to find a way forward with the people that are already here, and separation into ghettos and Kier Starmer being is knobhead self is not helping anyone. We need to consider that the language that we use is not working, and we need to look at other issues. The NHS is overrun.
Right, so you're giving symptoms instead of causes. So my question to you, Matt's just giving us a signal saying it's 5 minutes.
Some people do pay to use the NHS.
We'll address this point, and then I think we'll go away, sit for 5 minutes, have a cup of tea, and then come back and do a second episode on the same issue, because we're still talking about it. But I think we'll just release them within a week of each other or something. Yep. But we'll film it directly afterwards. So my question to you would then be, okay then, go on, give us a solution.
I'm not saying I have the solution. I'm saying that it's a much bigger issue.
But you're saying other people's solutions are wrong.
No, I'm saying that you cannot just focus on one one issue and then solve that one thing as though it's not a chain of events that got us to that one thing. We have to look at other things, and you cannot legally.
Several things that I would do.
Unless the UK is going to pull out of the
ECHR.
Thank you. How did you know?
Because I know you. I know you.
Fucking hell.
They should, by the way.
Unless they're going to do that tomorrow, they're going to change their laws tomorrow. They're going to stop funding, stop all foreign aid.
Well, there's a whole.
Foreign aid is a con, but that's a
shouldn't.
different thing. That I'm reading a book about that too. Foreign aid's a con. And they're going to do all of these things, even though we are situated in Europe. We have neighbours.
Well, that's that. See.
So how are you going to do that?
How are you going to leave the ECHR? You're in favour of leaving the ECHR.
I am, but I'm saying that you're not going to do that tomorrow. And if we need to be looking at these. This is the issue that I have, though, is this one-dimensional looking at it. It's a bigger issue than that. And then the way that we're reporting on it, not we, the what do you call mainstream media are reporting on it.
Are we cutting?
They're just focusing on one thing. Okay, we'll come back to this.
Sorry. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in 5 minutes, but you'll probably see us next week.
Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our views. That's the point of the conversation. Join in.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.